Welcome back to the Nullify Take channel, where we've got the TNT takes for you on Survivor. That's right, we're back for the first time in about 3 weeks. I'm joined by Mucky here as well, who was also on the very last podcast we did for 2022. Mucky, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, brother. Doing fantastic. How are you, Chris?
I'm great. I saw you drop in at the back just as I started the live, so perfect timing.
Literally the last 20 seconds, I was like, crap, join me. It was a bad rush, but we eventually got there.
Yeah, listen, I'm excited to have you because for those that are in the live, for those that are listening to this at a later stage, Mucky has got no idea who is winning what category. So he's going to be as shocked as everybody else when we do this. And, you know, I think it's going to be a lot of fun because we're going to talk about all of Survivor 2022. We're going to talk about the best of the best, who won each one of these categories. And Mucky, I'm sure you've got some strong opinions. I've got some strong opinions, and I'm sure the live audience will have some strong opinions.
Yeah, definitely. Let the clash of the titans begin, you know?
Let the clash of the titans begin.
Yeah.
We've got a few people here in the live already. Chris is saying Queen Marianne is an award winner. Very confident about the fact that Marianne will be walking away with at least one award here today. Christian Gall, welcome back to the live stream, saying the intro music is dope. It always hypes me up as well, Christian. Hangout Room, welcome to the live stream. Let me know, Hangout Room, if at any point you want to jump in on this live. I know it's like in the middle of the night for you, so no stress if you don't want to do it. But if you at any point want to jump in and say a few things, I didn't reach out to everyone because I wasn't sure if anybody in South Africa would be awake at this time to actually jump on and talk about it as well. We've got Georgette in here, Jimmy is back, and also the Fiery Tiger. Hey Chris, hey Mucky, fantastic job on the year's Survivor coverage. Survivor SA Return of the Outcast was my favorite. Dino was awesome. Fairy Tiger, welcome back to the live stream. Mucky, we've got a lot of things to talk about for this one specifically. We've got a few categories. So to refresh everybody on what those categories were, and we'll continue to expand on this as we do next year's award show for Survivor. It's something I'm very excited to continue to build on. We're going to talk about what season was the best for 2022. So obviously we had 42, 43, Blood versus Water in Australia, and then also Survivor South Africa Return of the Outcasts are up for nominations. We're going to talk about the best winner of the year. There were obviously 4 winners. That would be Marianne O'Ketch, Dino Polo, Mark Wells, and Mike Gabler. We're going to talk about the favorite player of the year, the biggest move of the year, the best player who didn't win, the most improved player, which was only based on South African players because I wanted to make it a full all-star season to look at that. And then we're got 2 special categories for Hall of Fame. We've got an international Hall of Fame and then also a Hall of Fame for Survivor. And we're going to continue to build on that Hall of Fame as we continue to build on this award show here on the Nullified Take each year. Hangout Room saying it's 3 a.m. next time, brother. I understand 100%. I know, Zoe, it probably takes about an hour or so just to get ready to jump on one of these live streams. So I just thought I'd throw it out there. It's my bad. I didn't ask you earlier, but I didn't think you were going to be awake, to be honest. Mucky, so what do you think of those categories? Who do you think is going to walk away with? Let's start on the first one. I guess let's start on the first one. Let's get into it because I think a lot of people are probably quite excited about this one. It's going to be the best season of 2022. And let's start off with Mucky. Which one of the seasons, 42, 43, Blood versus Water, or SA Return of the Outcast was your favorite for the year? And do you think that you're on the money with where people are going to vote, or do you think you've got a different opinion?
So I guess to answer the first part of the question, my personal favorite was Return of the Outcasts. I know a lot of people weren't so happy about the 4 episodes structure per week. But as someone who naturally loves Australian Survivor, I love having several episodes a week, even if it's like non-eliminations, like no tribal councils even. It's still like really, really cool. So I love Return of the Outcasts. And I know, as much from one international Survivor fan to another, I know that Blood versus Water had everyone just frothing for it. Everyone wanted more Blood versus Water. So I'm pretty certain Blood versus Water is going to win the best season.
Interesting. Okay. I like your take. So for me, obviously I know the answers to who's actually going to win this. For me personally, I agree with you about Return of the Outcasts. It was my favorite season of the year as well. I think obviously I'm a little bit biased because I'm from South Africa originally. It was great to see the South African franchise get its first returnee season. It's something that a lot of us were waiting for. And then I went into that season with such a low expectation because it was a lot of people on that season that I didn't feel like they were like deserving almost, of being on an all-star season because they had a pre-merger versus a post-merger season, but as the season got on and we saw people who were voted out first or second or third play at a different level this time because they were so afraid of being the first boot again, it actually became a really good season. And I also think that, we had some surprising superstars that emerged in this season. Maybe there's some of them that will win awards later on, that we didn't expect them to come in and play as good of a game as they did. And maybe because my expectation was low on it to begin with, when I heard the theme, it really shot it out of the park for me. But I think because we're international Survivor fans or super fans, whatever you want to call it, we look at the Blood versus Water season, we look at the SA Return of the Outcast season, a lot different to maybe a lot of the people who voted in this poll, because still at the end of the day, the US is a juggernaut, and we sometimes forget that most of the people who really watch the show consistently are from the US, and they're probably going to want to vote for some of the US favorite seasons above some of the international seasons. So without further ado, let's look at the first winning category here for this one here. Which season won best season of the year for 2022? And here it is. Survivor Season 42 won best season of 2022. Congratulations to everybody that was a part of this season. For me personally, I thought, when I look back at it, I was a bit shocked. I thought 43 might get a little bit more votes than 42, but 42 did end up taking this out quite convincingly. And I think because of the players really that were in that season, if you look back at some of that cast, we had, a lot of likable people. Marianne, obviously a likable person, a likable winner. You had Mike, who was a really big presence. You had Jonathan. You had Drea with all her advantages. You had Omar, who was very likable. Lindsay, who was the great challenge beast who went up against Jonathan. There were so many good storylines. Even pre-merge or post-merge, or pre-merge before they went into the merge, we had Daniel, who was a great character. We had Swati, who I thought was an interesting character. So I wasn't too surprised when I started thinking about it again. How do you feel about Survivor 42 winning?
I also kind of have a feeling that Survivor 42 would definitely be up there for to be the best season. And I think mostly a lot of it's because of the winner. I think potentially if Mike had won, no disrespect to Mike, I love Mike. I think if Mike won, people probably looked a bit more down on the season. But I think the fact that Marianne won, such a great, loving, amazing, funny character, people think more highly of the season. And that probably has one of the best tribal councils of all time with the Jenny vote out. The whole episode was great because that was the one where Jonathan did the whole challenge by himself, basically, like the water one. So it's got one of the best episodes ever in the season as well. So it's definitely a deserving win.
Yeah, well, you look at the stats here, Survivor 42, and thank you for everybody that voted in this. We had 142 responses to this, and with that, it doesn't become the Mucky show or the Chris show in regards to what we want, because if it was up to us, we were in the 24% that voted for Survivor South Africa Return of the Outcasts, but we were outvoted by the majority. 41% of people voted for 42. Second was 43, so there were definitely some people who voted for 43 as well and enjoyed that as the second most favorite season of the year. And then Blood vs. Water, the one you thought were going to win this category outright, only got 6% at the end of the day, Mucky. So I think personally that a lot of the people who voted in this, they probably didn't appreciate how straightforward the season was in regards to who was going to win. It was predictable at times. The edit was very lopsided on that season. So I think it's not that the quality and the production of the show isn't there. I think it's just Australian Survivor in recent seasons, they've been getting a few things wrong.
Yeah, definitely. I actually think that the pre-merge of Blood versus Water was probably the best pre-merge out of all the seasons, I reckon.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't disagree with you on that at all. We get Chris here in the comments saying, yes, Survivor 42, Marianne stays winning. So Chris really letting us know that Marianne is the person that she's shouting for in this next category. And the next category is going to be about the best winner of the year. Very interested to know, who do you rate as the best winner of this year, Mucky, and why? And do you think your best winner of the year will be the same as the fans?
Yeah, so in my opinion, the best winner was definitely Marianne. I felt like something that the Marianne had done so well, which I only realized actually today when I was on my way home to jump on this podcast, was the fact that she played on the bottom. She wasn't at the top of the alliance. She wasn't really in the middle of the alliance, but she played like the bottom half of the alliance. So she was able to form strong relationships with a Romeo, with a Tori and stuff, which is people she could have used to make a move. Like with the Omar blindsiders, her Romeo and an extra vote that they voted for Omar. So definitely, I think Marianne in general played like the bottom extremely well without actually getting targeted, if that makes sense. Like she was on the bottom, but she wasn't really on the bottom because she was never someone who people legitimately wanted to vote out. So I felt Marianne was probably the best winner, and I think the audience is going to vote for Marianne as the best winner too.
Okay, yeah. I like your confidence there in your choice and also where the audience is going to vote, especially after getting the first one wrong. But let's have a look and see what happens on this one. So for me personally, when I looked at this year and the winners that were there, I really thought Mark Wales played the best winning game of all of the winners this season, or this specific year, for Blood versus Water. I think that a lot of people won't give it to Mark potentially because one of the things, when you look at some of the best winners that we've ever had in Survivor, like a Rob Bentelli, you look at a Kim Spradlin-Wolf, you look at a Boston Rob, they make their seasons boring because they're so in control of their season and they're never in danger. They dictate all the votes. And I think Mark Wales played that type of game. He was never in danger. Yeah. No one ever really wanted to vote him out. I mean, there were people leaking information about him and the fact that he had 2 idols on him potentially, and still his alliance members didn't believe him or didn't believe that he had it. So the amount of control that he had on that game for me was insane. But you have to go back and sort of ask yourself, like, how do you rate a winning game? Like when I said vote for the best winner could be anything to different people. It could be who played the most strategic game, which I kind of gravitated towards. Who was the person who was the most in control of their season? I thought Mark Wales was the most control of all the winners this year of his season and was never in doubt. It was that obvious that I called him winning, I think in the 2nd or 3rd week of Australian Survivor, and he never lost that grip that he had on the competition. So that's where I would have voted personally. But obviously we know that Australian Survivor Blood versus Water didn't do well in the votes for best season. So, if you look at that, you probably are right in the sense that he probably wouldn't win that season. How did you come to Marianne? You mentioned that Marianne was at the bottom. She played from the bottom. What do you rate when you look at best winner? What categories do you put out there for yourself to say, this is the winner, this is the one I want to win this season, or the best of the year?
Well, it's definitely very hard because I was actually having a very deep chat with one of my close mates this morning about how do you win Survivor? Because it often always depends on the cast. Like, there's some cast like a Redemption Island cast where no one wants to make any moves. They just want to stay on just one side of a line so you can easily just dominate your way through. Or maybe you get a cast like Karga where everyone's flipping on each other. You get what I mean? So it's definitely very hard to determine like what is the best way to win a Survivor season. But I felt like with Marianne, I feel like if you were to get all the winners from this year, Dino, Marianne, Mike Gabler, and Mark, Marianne wins more times than the other 3. And I think that's because Mark, he's, 2 out front, he's definitely a challenge beast and alpha, which normally those type of people would get voted out early merge. Mike Gabler.
But there's one thing I want to say about Mark when you say that. I agree with you. Most of the time, alphas are targeted very early on. But also for a reason, because they assume the leadership position from the start. They play from the front. But one of the things that Mark did extremely well was he did take lead at the challenges and he helped his team win immunities quite a lot in the challenges. But at camp, he let Josh become the leader. He had a meat shield strategy, and he had Josh be that person that would take the hits when it came to strategizing or being more vocal at camp, and I think Mark, I don't necessarily agree he comes back and does worse than Marianne in every scenario. And the reason for that, for me personally, I've always said that with Marianne, she needed the right opportunity to strike to win that season, which she got, and she hung in there for long enough to get it. But there were plenty of opportunities in a different season where Marianne becomes a pre-merge boot because her tribe loses too many immunities. If they lost one more immunity in Taku, I think she was out. And she was never really the number one choice for any of her alliance members. But I don't want to take away from the fact that she is still a great winner. And I think that her win was bigger than what you and I probably can appreciate, because overall it was an overwhelming vote for Marianne to win Best Winner of the Season for 2022. Over 50% of people voted for Marianne to win. So Chris, 100%, you got Marianne as a winner. You got it right. And I think that Chris has got her finger on the pulse for where the American public currently is in regards to having a representative winner, someone that is black, that has won the show, the first winner in 20 years since Vesepia. A lot of people felt like it was overdue, so I think that made her very likable. I think that Best probably for a lot of people also meant who was their favorite winner of the year. And I can completely understand why she would be a lot of people's favorite winner for the year, because she came into that game as a lovable underdog. She was a little bit socially out there, very vocal about her thoughts and opinions at tribal council. She had the great quote about, being gutted when Zach was voted out because it was her type of white boy, and she couldn't meet him at the merge. She was a great character. And I've always said, as a Survivor player, I would want to have a Marianne on every season because she is just a bubbly personality. So I understand the likability and the cult-like following that someone like Marianne has. And like I said, best winner to me, maybe she wasn't my best winner for 2022, but I fully appreciate, she deserved to win her season. She made the biggest move of the year, by taking out, in my mind, the biggest player of her season to win that show. And she showed great awareness, and she's a super fan. What's there not to like, Mucky? Let's be honest. There isn't much not to like about Marianne as a player and as a winner.
Yeah, I love Marianne, absolutely. Every time she had a confessional, I was either laughing or smiling. She's definitely one of the best characters in US Survivor, definitely.
Yeah, so it's again, like Chris said here, I'd no doubt that Marianne would be voted the best winner. Love her game and what her win stands for. And again, like I said, it was overdue. It came at a point where we had a male dominant era in the 30 to 40s seasons, where now a lot of people don't want any men to win. And Gabler's win was such a controversial thing. But I mean, again, for me, when you come to Gabler, he's not a controversial winner. He's the best player to win his season, and the best player always wins. Let's just put that to rest. Marianne won his season. In my mind, Gabler was the best winner in his season. He won it. But again, very, very outvoted on this one here. Let's bring up the results. Let's just make sure that I don't spoil anything else there that we don't want people to see. Stop screen and share. Sorry, guys. I should have been a bit more prepared with this next one. Here we go. So this is the votes and how it stands. So 50.7% of people voted for Marianne. Mike Gabler received the second most at 20.7% of votes. Then Dino, and then Mark. So Mark was Mark was third, and then Dino in the top four. And once again, for any of the winners that are watching this potentially, because I actually know that Mark is a fan of the podcast. I know that Dino does listen to some of the podcasts as well. They'll know. They just went up against the juggernaut show of the US. And most people that voted probably watched the US. Not all of them probably watched the international versions. So, like I said, all four winners this year, I don't have an issue with any of the four winners. I thought all four winners this season did a great job in winning their season.
Yeah, absolutely. Every winner deserves to win one way or another, and definitely all of them played really well for their type of season as well.
All right, so you go ahead.
I think if you were to put all of the winners into each other's seasons, all of them would have a really hard time winning that season. I think Mark's way of winning was with the All Male Alliance and Blood vs. Water, but maybe he would have struggled in Return of the Outcast or season 42, But yeah. And I think
it's really hard. It sometimes is really hard to know how someone would do if you haven't seen them play twice as well, because you don't know if they would adapt their game or they wouldn't adapt their game. We've seen winners come back and play a terrible game, so you just don't know. But I do agree with you. Marianne comes back in a lot of cases because of what she stands for and what she represents. People will want to play with her. And I think in the US franchise, she might make it further than what people may expect her to make it. So I wouldn't be surprised that all of Marianne, but the killer, the person who I think will come back and absolutely mop the floor with a lot of players is Erica. I honestly think she's a way better player than what people appreciate. I know she wasn't up for this nomination, and because the edit didn't show a lot of her game, I think people would think that she was a nothing winner that didn't really play the game, and that would help her go further.
Yeah, absolutely.
Survivor Now podcast, welcome to the live stream. Everybody that have not checked out Survivor Now podcast, do so. They're great as well. Top player this season was Mark. I agree to Survivor Now podcast. I don't know if you heard the beginning part of it. That was my personal choice as well. Sadly, did get voted out in this one here. And good day to you as well, sir. All right, so the next category is going to be favorite player of the year. The people who were up for this, just to refresh your mind here, Mucky, was Omar, Phil Dixon, Marianne DeVos, Geordie Hansen, Jesse Lopez, and Cassidy Clark. Now, the reason I put Cassidy in there was because of the outrage. And I was like, well, I got to put her in there because she's got a lot of love. Let's see how many people will stand and fall on this sword of Cassidy and vote for her as the best player or the favorite player that they had this season. And who do you think out of that category, who do you think is the person who's most likely your favorite player out of that group and most likely to win?
My favorite player was definitely Phil. Yeah, Phil from Survivor South Africa. And wait, is Marianne in?
Marianne's in there as well. So Phil and Marianne, just two Survivor South Africa players.
Oh, this is Marianne from Survivor South Africa.
Oh, yeah, Marianne from Survivor South Africa. I think Marianne, if we put her in there, she probably would have won, but I didn't put any winners into the favorite player category at all. Because they already won the best winner. So I don't want them to just clean the floor, but she probably could have won this.
Because I recall I personally voted for Marianne. But I think it's going to come down to between Phil and Jesse.
Phil and Jesse. Okay.
For the winner, yeah.
Survivor Now podcast here says, we love Marion. Sorry, Dino, has to be her. Felt like the season with the most lovable characters would be 42 and Return of the Outcasts. And it's kind of where I guess half of where you're leaning as well on this one. We only had one person for 42 on, which was Omar, who was very popular. I can say that Omar did not win this. He got second place at 21%, but it was an overwhelming favorite that got 46% of it at the end for the fans' favorite player of the season of this year. Let's have a look at who that was.
So funny if it's Cassidy.
Congratulations to Jesse.
Oh, yeah.
Not Cassidy. Jesse won fans' favorite player of 2022. I think that for me personally, I lean towards Omar. I really enjoyed Omar because Omar had, not that I don't like Jesse. By the way, Jesse followed me on Twitter, claim to fame. Thank you, Jesse, for following us. I really enjoyed Jesse this season. It's nothing against it, but I felt like, Jesse played the game so hard and he was so passionate about it because the game was more than just a game for him. It was about life. It was about getting himself and his family in a better position, which is why he made some of the tough decisions that he had to make in his season, where I felt like with Omar, there were points where I felt in on the joke about him like playing all these people against each other. And he was like a lovable villain in some ways. Like he had a certain suave about him in the way that he, his aura and how he approached the cameras and how he spoke to us about what he was thinking. And, Omar, I'll never forget, man, like, well, we might talk about some more of this when we talk about best player not to win. So I don't know if I want to go into that, but yeah, I really enjoyed Omar. I thought he was a fun character. This was a tough one though, because I do agree with you. Phil was a lot of fun to watch this season. Marianne, I kind of put in the same category as Jesse, where at times it was tough to watch her because she was playing, like I enjoyed her, but she took the game so serious. You know what I mean? It was like, I like someone having a little bit of fun with the show, like a Rick Devens, which I thought Omar did as well this season. But overwhelming favorite here, Jesse. I think people really enjoyed how he dominated the season. Maybe a little bit of recency bias, I would say, maybe with this as well, because this season did just finish as well. But let's have a look at the final results and where everybody's sitting. I just want to make sure I'm not spoiling the next results. So overall, 46% of people voted for Jesse. Second place was Omar at 21%. Cassidy had third most. So she did get quite a bit of support as well. And then Marianne was fourth, the highest of the international players, followed by Phil Dixon. And then Geordie, surprisingly, not a lot of people like the Joker, Mucky.
Well, I think it's a recent thing with Australian Survivor as well, where it's quite funny. I was listening to a review for Brains versus Brawn actually the other day, and I didn't even realize this, but in the episode that Mitch gets voted out, only 5 people get a confessional that episode.
Yeah.
Only 5 people, which only 2 of them were Braun, 3 of them were Brain. And it's like, wow, that's actually nuts, you know. So I think a lot of people are kind of sick of the George/Geordie show of getting 100 confessionals per episode, which is going to make Heroes versus Villains much more entertaining because there's going to be 200 confessionals, 100 divided by each. So, but yeah, I'm quite shocked that a lot of international players aren't getting more recognition. But I wonder if it's for most of our audience being more American than international, maybe. Yeah.
I think it definitely has a little bit of a role to play. I didn't want to split it up into like an international category and into a Survivor US category for this year. Maybe I do that next year because then it'll only be like 2 seasons for each one of them.
Yeah.
But it may be a little bit more fair for more international people to get a little bit of recognition as well. But we live and learn by this as well.
Yeah.
And what I did appreciate was when I looked at the responses for most improved player of the year, you know, overall we had 142 responses to this survey. Only 102 people responded to the 100 to the most improved, which means that at least 102 out of the 144 felt confident enough to answer that question that they watched the international season. So it's not too bad of a ratio if you think about that as well. And maybe some people, you know, like it is the original show is Survivor US, the CBS version of it. So it will always have most of the love, I think, even with some of the changes they've made to the format and that people are still staying. And I'm one of those people. I feel like the format has changed a lot, but I'm a lot more comfortable with it now, having seen 3 iterations of it than what I was watching 41. So I've softened on some of the things that changed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know. For me, it's the opposite. I started on Australian Survivor. That's how I first got into Survivor. It was Australian Survivor, Survivor New Zealand, and then it was American Survivor. So, yeah, I'm still a bit iffy on American Survivor here, there, but definitely my love always does go towards Australian. So I do have some massive bias towards there.
And that's fair. All right, so the next one that we're going to be looking into was the biggest move or biggest blindside of the year. There were a few categories up here. We had the Sam blindside on Jesse after stealing his hidden immunity idol. So big one there for Australian Survivor. The No BS Lions blindsiding Meryl at Tribal Council and letting Meryl play her Tribal Council pass on.
Oh, that's right.
Marianne of that season. Then Marianne blindsiding Omar in the final 6 to ultimately go on and win that season. And then Drea sent packing with all of her advantages, which was a record amount of advantages that she went home with. And then lastly, but not least, Jesse blindsiding Cody with his own idol. Which one of the different ones that are up here for potential, recognition do you think is going to win this award?
I think Jesse and Cody's idol is going to win. I personally think that the Meryl blindside is probably like the best, as well as Sam taking Jesse's idol, because it's one thing to blindside someone with an idol in their pocket, but it's another thing to actually steal their idol and keep it for, I'm not sure how many more votes, but also at least like 8 to 9 more votes even after that before even potentially playing it, So I'd say probably Cody's blindside is going to be the one that wins.
Yeah. Survivor Now podcast agrees with you, says easy choice has to be Jesse, straight cold blooded.
And same with Sam.
Oh, Sam's one was very cold blooded as well. If you think about the fact that they were from the start, they were together.
Yeah.
And she turned on him because of, and I think any other season, Jesse's read would have been right on Sam that she would stay loyal to him, but it was because literally her husband was pulling her the other way. Like, I mean, she shares a bank account with Mark. She was never going to do what Jesse wanted her to do in that situation. So I think any other season he would have been all right, but he got screwed a little bit by the twist of Blood versus Water that season. For me personally, I thought Marianne's Omar vote was probably the biggest move, best blindside of the year, because it ultimately resulted in Marianne winning that season. I don't think she wins that season without that move in my mind, or she would have had a very difficult time convincing people that she played the game, if she didn't make that move at that time. And I think Omar played very well with Marianne throughout the season and always had Marianne in his pocket as a potential option until she realized and became aware that she needed to take him out. Where a lot of players in the past, they've gone to the end, they've gotten there, but they've never taken the shot that they needed to take to win the season. They never had the guts to do it, and she did. But ultimately, what both of us think doesn't matter. What did the audience decide? Well, I can tell you the biggest blindside was on Cody. So Jesse's move to take out Cody, we had a bromance here that started forming, throughout the season. I thought it could be the whole JT versus Stephen Fishback situation at the end. But Jesse, who was the Stephen Fishback in the situation, didn't let it go there. He took out JT before they got to the end. And ultimately, I think this would have been a winning move for Jesse if he did win the fire-making challenge. Obviously, he didn't get that. But, I was going back and forth in my head. Like, the edit made us believe that Jesse would have beaten Cody at the end. But when you hear the exit press, when you hear how people spoke about Cody, it sounds like it was the only move to make because Cody was so loved.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really hard because the final 5 is the next vote, which that's the last time we play an idol. And apparently Cody was really good at fire making. So even though I think when Jesse made this move, he heavily exposed himself at the same time, when else is he going to make this move?
Yeah, I think it was a massive move. I mean, it shows us where Survivor has evolved to now. Like, you cannot play Survivor anymore and have a ride or die to go to the end anymore because people will cut you no matter what, and it's not the first time it's happened. It's not going to be the last time it's happened. Cody had a great move in trying to flush Carla's idol, and then that could have been a winning move. That could have been the big move. And then Jesse just one-upped him by making this move to take out Cody. So it was quite recent, so recency bias may have played into it as well. But it definitely, I mean, when this happened, was one of the few times this season where I was like fist pumping. I was like, what a move. What gameplay by Jesse. So well deserved. Also, just want to read some of the comments. Survivor Now podcast says, got a point, Chris. Marianne locked up the win with that bombshell reveal of the idol. I think definitely that was an amazing play as well, and it definitely helped. But I ultimately think if she sat next to Omar, it would have been difficult to make a case that she ran the game more than Omar. I honestly think that even with the idol reveal, she would have had a tough time to win that season. I could be wrong. I didn't read a lot of because I remember there being something, Mucky, about Drea poisoning the jury against Omar, and that all got cut from Rob as a podcast because there was some stuff happening there.
I recall reading about that as well, which I mean, I think that definitely could have hurt his game as well if Omar made it to the end, but I definitely do think if we just look at it from how season 42 was edited, definitely Omar would have had the win. Yeah. But I've also noticed like a lot of Hell's season, like the new era has been sort of formatted and edited as that, everything's so positive, everything's so lovely. I was shocked that, they even aired the James and Owen fight that they had, because like a lot of the whole new era is like, wow, we love this companionship, camaraderie, play, recognizing player. But there's actually so much more that goes on beyond that. So I was quite shocked that they actually did show an Owen versus James like verbal argument and stuff. Yeah,
they do hide a lot of that these days, but I'm glad they did show it. I think that's one of the things that makes Survivor South Africa so compelling to watch, because it's raw. Like you see the fights at camp, you see people arguing about who stole food and things like that in a tribal council, and it's that rawness that I really enjoy personally when I watch Survivor. And I'm glad they showed that they didn't take it out. But a lot of what happened with Drea and Omar was politically, I feel like, motivated. And Survivor is trying to stay away from that because 41 and 42, well, 42, they kind of took it out. 41, I think, got slammed for it a little bit. And sometimes they say there's no such thing as bad press, but in Survivor's case, I don't know. I don't know if you want to go down that road. So I feel like they do try and remove some of that now, if they admit it or not. They're removing it in some of the later seasons, because 43 didn't really have that either. I don't want to bring up the results here so we can have a look at it. So overwhelmingly, 56% of people voted for the Jesse blindside on Cody. It was really not even a question of who else could potentially win. Marianne blindsiding Omar was second at 17%, followed by the Sam blindside on Jesse. Followed by, which one is it? Equal for Drea, Sam packing with all their advantages, and the No BS Alliance equal at 6%. So quite overwhelmingly, people voted for that move as the biggest move of the year. The next one is going to be who is the best player of the year. And I kind of let 4 people in here who I personally thought played the best. So it was the best player who didn't win, I should add. Obviously, the best player always wins, but do they? Some players really dominated their season, but they didn't get the win at the end. And I made sure that there was one nominated player from each one of the seasons here. We had Marion DeVos for Survivor South Africa Return of the Outcasts.
Yeah.
We had Josh Mulgate for Australian Survivor Blood versus Water. Omar for 42 and Jesse for 43. Who do you think the audience voted for, and who would you have voted for the best player this season or this year, 2022, who didn't win?
I believe I voted for Marianne. I feel like she played an extremely good game in Return of the Outcast. She basically was in one massive alliance, and apart from the Stephen Blind side, she basically dominated the entire pre and post merge as well. And so I think that the audience is going to vote for Jesse because of recency bias and because of the more like sort of American awards that's been coming up recently. So I definitely think Jesse is going to win. Omar is second, then Marion third, and Josh fourth.
Second and third. I just want to see how close you are to the actual results here. Let's have a look at who ultimately won. And no surprises, Jesse won overwhelmingly, I should say. He had over 70% of the vote.
Oh, crap.
So it's undisputed that people think he was the best player of the year who didn't win. And it's hard to disagree with that. It is really hard to disagree. I mean, Jesse really, there were times, one of the reasons I enjoyed Survivor 43, and I thought that it may get a bit more love in the best season of the year compared to what it actually did, was the fact that, you know, Jesse made moves at certain times in the game to cut allies and things where I was like, are you making the right move? Like cutting Neko really early, jumping ship from Dwight and Noel when he did. A lot of the times I was like, why is he making these moves so early? Kind of similar to what Tony did in his original season in Kageyama. We constantly questioned, like, you know, are you doing the right thing turning on your alliance so soon after the merge? But he always found a way to wiggle himself to the top of the hierarchy and the decision making. And most of all is he had the right-hand person in Cody who had such a charismatic presence about him where people wanted to work with Cody, but he was the one constantly feeding Cody the information. This is what we do next. This is where we've got to go. And it was definitely a partnership, but I always felt like Jesse ultimately, you know, there's this little thing when it comes to like great players where you want to be in conversations with people and you want them to do what you want them to do, but you don't want to force them to do it. You want them to feel like it's their decision. And I thought Jesse, similar to Omar, was very good. I actually think Jesse and Omar are very similar players, and I would actually rate themselves. I think I may have voted for Omar in this spot, but it's so tight between the two of them in regards to who was the best player for me personally.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, like all 4 of them would have been a great player to win, so it's definitely hard to try to pick one to be the best player who didn't win. So
yeah, no, 100%. Surviving Our podcast said, call me crazy, but I think Shane could have had a play at this. Yes, Jesse deserves it, but Shane played a great game with the cards he was dealt. I think his game this year doesn't get enough recognition. Shane, who's Shane? Why?
Return of the Outcasts.
Return of the Outcasts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure because when I look back at Shane,
I completely forgot. That just gives you an idea of the. Listen, let's explore that for a second. Surviving Our podcast is a good point, actually. He made it to the end, but he was a shadow of his former self in regards to his presence or influencing the game. But you make a good point. Because of the cards that he was dealt with, he was a lot older. His main person in Marianne was willing to turn on him very early in the game and let him be a sacrificial lamb. He kind of played, you're right, he played the best game with the cards he was dealt with. He was a lot older than everybody else out there, and nobody trusted him because he had such a big reputation coming into the season to begin with. So if you look at the reputation he had no right to make it to the final 2. The fact that he got to the final 2 is actually still an amazing feat.
Yeah, I still recall he tried to make a couple moves here and there. Like I think about like how he realized that Dante was flipping on either him or potentially, you know, Chappies, and he tried to change it, but no one would listen to him. So I felt like with Shane,
that's right. He had good reads.
He had very good reads, but he never actually had the capital to actually pull anything off, if that makes sense. It felt like it was more Marianne who was making the blindsides happen. Well, Shane definitely had great reads and great insights on how they would potentially do things that he really needed. It's quite similar between Tony and Sarah. I think they both need each other to go extremely deep into any season they play. And I think same with Shane and Marianne. I think Shane really, really needs Marianne to do a lot of the social work for him.
Well,
for
Sarah won her season with Tony being voted out first, or second that season. So I don't know. I get what you're saying. I think in Winners at War, they needed each other badly to do well, and they played well together. But I think that, there's circumstances where people forgot who they were and they would come back. I think they could go pretty deep. And I mean, Sarah also did really well in the Challenge USA. So without Tony. So I kind of feel like she's just a good game player in general. It's like, definitely there's flaws to her. And I know there's some people here that watched the Challenge USA didn't like Sarah that much in the Challenge USA, but she's a pretty good game player, like if people like her or not. So I don't know. But I get what you're saying. Marianne and Shane definitely played well together, but Marianne was willing to cut him at a lot of different points in that season. And I know that, Shane getting all the way to the final and really just getting badly outvoted there is something that up until today is still affecting him badly. Like he felt like he deserved more than that. So it's an interesting one. I obviously didn't put Shane up here, but when it comes to the people that I did put up here, let's have a look at the votes. Let's see where people landed on the votes. So, like I said, 73% of people voted for Jesse. Second was Omar at 12%. Then Marianne at 11%, followed by Josh at only 2%. And I think, for me personally, I think Josh is an amazing player. I think Josh comes back in any other season and dominates because people will underestimate him because his edit was so bad. Like they never gave him an edit that season when everybody kept saying, let's check in with Josh, see if Josh is on board with this plan. Then we'll do it. So clearly he was like the mafioso of that season, but the edit just did not show us that. So I feel pretty bullish about like Josh getting another shot at some point. Well, I actually at one point thought Josh would be on a Heroes versus Villains season as a hero. That ship has sailed because he's got a newborn, and obviously even if they did ask him, he wouldn't have been able to do this season coming up. But I really hope he gets another shot at some point because I feel like the edit did him dirty.
I mean, hey, like next season, Return of the Outcast Australian Survivor, half returnee, half newbie.
Yeah, who knows? Crossover season. Like, I mean, these days they bring back almost anyone in Australian Survivor. So I feel like anyone could stand a chance of coming back and playing again. Russell Muscle TV, welcome to the live stream. Jesse was legendary new school style villain. And I agree. Like, I mean, he was a cutthroat villain, but he's still a nice villain. Like, we don't have
he's really good villain.
Real villains anymore. I don't feel like, But if we had to classify him as a villain, I guess him and Omar, like I said, they're kind of similar in the way they played. One thing I did forget to mention, why I really enjoyed Omar so much was Omar had something similar to how Dino played the game, which is he's really good at playing with people's emotions. And I don't think Jesse was that level of a game player. Like, and he's got other skills that, obviously made him great. But if you think about the Mike Fenter reward where they went to go watch the cinema and Mike Fenter, he saw, not Mike Fenter, Mike from that season, any case, Mike Turner. Who went to the reward show, the thing where they saw the movie and they saw from the family back home. Mike was vulnerable in that moment, right? And he was like seeing his family, and Omar chose that as the time to strike against High and say, High is the person, he's saying you're a meat puppet. He's telling you what to do. If he says jump, you'll ask how high. That level of awareness when it comes to playing the emotional game and how to tweak on people's emotions and put them against each other. I just respect that so much of Omar. I think he's a high level game player and would be very dangerous any season that he comes back. And if I was to play with Omar, I love Omar. He follows the channel as well. But Omar, if I was with you, get rid of me before I get rid of you because I wouldn't want to play with you. You're dangerous, Similar to Jesse because Jesse is sneaky.
Very sneaky, but not as sneaky as Steve though.
Yeah.
But that's for later on this year.
Chris says, to me, a villain needs to own their moves and their underhandedness. If they do that and do that well, they're a good villain. That's true. Yeah. I agree. And I don't know, like, how many people actually like that and own being a villain these days. Maybe like a George. I feel like George owns it, and like he's going to be on the villains tribe this year for Australian Survivor. Odette said, "I'll be shocked if Jesse doesn't become the face of the new era, similar to Boston Rob post All Stars." Yeah, like who else would be the face of New School Survivor?
Marianne, maybe a Ricard.
Marianne, I think Marianne could be the new Sandra Diaz Swine of New School Survivor. And that's high praise. That's high praise. But obviously she hasn't gone and won a second season, but I could see her be like that, or the new Sari Fields type of player, I could see that. I'm trying to think who else is, because the funny thing is Ricard kind of anointed himself as a legend a couple of seasons ago. He said, he was a legend or something, which I always found funny because doesn't the audience decide who the legends are? You don't decide exactly, you're a legend. Exactly. So, I mean, just based on that alone, I wouldn't put Ricard up there. I think maybe O'Mara is good, but I think Jesse's got that level of popularity now where he could be like that. Shan, I don't know. Like, Shan's really fallen off the radar with fans outside of the show. I feel like she's not as popular.
True.
So I don't know about that at all, and if we would even see her come back. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody else outside of Jesse to be that. I think you're right. Whoever said that, Odette, I think you're right. I think Jesse is probably going to be the next Boston Rob level of player. Like we see, I'll put it out there. We see Jesse come back 2 more times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jay says, while Omar would know how to deal with emotions since he's a vet, and being a vet can come with having to deal with people's emotions. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. That's true. That's true. I don't know where Dino got that because he's a game escape room, owner. So where did he learn how to play with people's emotions?
He makes it that hard to escape.
Survivor Now podcast says Ricardo's a face for new era. Maybe. I mean, people will remember him as the person who removed "Come on in, guys." So he'll be remembered for something, And there's no hate to Ricard at all because I think he is a great player. Actually, I just don't like it when people call themselves legends. Let me just put that out there. I've got a problem with that. Let the fans decide who the legends are. We decide that. And in that case, I say Jesse. But I'm not opposed to Ricard coming back. He did play a good season. Yeah. In his season, and I do want to see the Ricard versus Sean season. Absolutely. Because they really dislike each other outside of the game, from what I've heard. Yeah. So that could be entertaining.
Yeah, that'd be great to watch. I recall, like in their deep dives on iHab, since the Metalod moves together, if you watch both of the podcasts, all they do is kind of just shit talk each other, going, "No, I was the one that did this. No, I was the one doing."
See, that's the problem for me. I feel like it's clout chasing with those two. Like it's what I feel like. Yeah. I mean, I could be wrong. I feel like it's a little bit of that. Where I don't think Jesse's going to be like that. I don't think Omara's like that. It's just let our game speak for itself. But anyways, let's see what else they're saying here. So Jay says, "What about Jonathan?" I don't think so. I mean, I like Jonathan. I honestly, I'm not in the camp of people who don't like Jonathan. I actually wouldn't mind seeing him again. But I just feel like they overhyped Jonathan so much. Like I think Jonathan, here's what I think. This is who Jonathan is. Jonathan is the new James Clement for this era.
Yeah. I can see him being the Aussie with the new era or potentially the James.
No, he hasn't won enough. Don't give Jonathan
true.
Like James was great at the tribal pre-merge stuff. The pre-merge, similar to Jonathan, but I don't think James was ever like an individual immunity beast, and Jonathan surely isn't either. Like he only won 2. You're talking about Aussie, who's like one of the record holders for most individual immunity wins of all time.
Yeah, no, that is true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Chris says Jonathan is dominant, but not the face of the brand. I agree.
Yeah, I think Jonathan, as well as Jesse, comes back another 2 times.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Mr. Jeff Probst liked him. So Mr. Jeff, I mean, Jeff just likes anybody who calls him Mr. Jeff. So I think he'll bring him back. I think he'll bring him back.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Enough stalling. On to the next one here. We've got most improved player of the year. And for this category, there may be a few people here in the audience who have not watched International Survivor. For those ones, I do apologize. The next 5 to 10 minutes may be a bit boring because we're going to talk about Survivor South Africa Return of the Outcast. But for most improved player, we had 4 players. I only wanted to make it a full returnee season to make it fair. I think with the rest of it, maybe I could have thrown Sammy in there and she probably would have had a good chance as well. She did really well coming back and playing again.
Andy.
But no, Andy sadly, like, I mean, guys, his goose was cooked as soon as he got there. That's the same, right? Okay, most improved player. We've got 4 people. We've got Phil Dixon. We've got Marianne de Vos, Steffi Brink, and Felix Godlow. Now, I will say this. This was the most competitive category that we've had so far. Most of them have been pretty one-sided in regards to who won. Who out of Phil, Marianne, Steffi, and Felix do you think got the honor of being the most improved player?
Well, actually, I feel like you could have added a 5th person in there. I feel like you could have added Dante in there because I was actually, definitely when the tribe swap happened, it started to fall apart a bit with the whole trying to get dinner out. But hey, he's correctly, targeted the winner of both the seasons.
Did he improve though? Did he improve as a player from his previous time?
I feel like he did. I felt like, because the problem is the first time he played, no one wanted to work with him. But I felt like he got into a really good alliance, and it was only because he kept trying to force them to vote off Dino. That's why they flipped on him. But I think if he just wasn't as pushy, he probably does stay for a bit longer. But I think in terms of most improved, it will either be Steffi or is Phil in there?
Yeah, he's in there.
Yeah, it's either Steffi or Phil, I reckon.
And I think you're on the money with the 2 people that you nominated as the most improved. It's hard for Steffi because she went deeper the previous time she played, but I saw her gameplay. I mean, like at one point at the merge, I was like, she's winning. Like, I mean, she's got everybody. Like, she's got all these different alliances working with her. Sadly, it was a returnee seasons with very capable game body type of players who recognized the threat in Steffi because she's a physical beast. She was, connecting emotionally with so many people, which was her biggest weakness the first time she played, not being able to be vulnerable in front of people and let them in a little bit. And I mean, I'm a massive Steffi stan, always will be. So, for me, normally when she's up for a vote, I'll throw a vote Steffi's way. But in this case, I do think it went to the person who really deserved to get the reward. It wasn't Steffi. Ultimately, the person who is going to take out this one is none other than Phil Dixon for most improved player of 2022. Now, if you look at Phil, he was out 5th in his original season, came back as someone who was a pre-merger. He was 10 years older than what he was the first time he played. He had a dad bod coming into this thing. No one thought he would become the challenge beast of the season. Won 4 individual immunities, 1 short of the record for Survivor South Africa and also the global record for most individual wins in a season. And, I had the opportunity to sit down with Leroux Botha, name dropping, executive producer for Survivor South Africa when I was in South Africa. And we had a chat and Leroux said, like, Phil Dixon is now the gold standard for Survivor South Africa when it comes to confessionals and how to be entertaining. So he's like, if someone wants to be on the show, this is what he wants to see and a castaway coming onto the show, because his one-liners, the level of fun that he brought to the show, and just outright laughing. Like, I mean, the Pinty comment about Pinty running around pre-merge, and he's like, Pinty's like this angry dog, and no one knows who the owner is, and it's off its leash, and it just keeps running in between people. He just had the greatest like one-liners, and I think it's well deserved, because if he did get to the final, I think he had a legitimate case to win the season. He had a lot of respect under the people that he played with in regards to the level of strategy he used. I mean, him and Dino's game were very similar, but he also had the individual immunity wins.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, I haven't seen season 5, but from what I've heard from other people, Phil wasn't really doing much either. He didn't really make any moves or anything. Right from
he was funny. He was funny, similar to how he was funny on this one. I knew we would get good confessionals from him, and he was a villain and wanted to play villain, like stole food and things like that. So he adapted his game a lot, but he didn't get the opportunity to go deep. They cut him out very, very early on.
And he really led the Preemage tribe as well, from Blindsided Kevin and Chambers. Everyone was coming to him, and and I think definitely the biggest blunder of this year is when he accidentally voted for Shona instead of Dante. Definitely one of my favorite international episodes this year. But yeah, I think he definitely deserves that. Yeah.
No, I agree 100% with you. Let's have a look at how the votes unfolded. I just want to make sure that we don't give anything away for the next category. So like I said, the tightest category overall,
wow.
like if you see there. So 34% went to Phil Dixon as the most improved player. Second was Marianne on 24%. And then an equal for both Felix and also Steffi. And I think this kind of shows why the season was so good in both our minds, Bucky, because we both had Survivor Return of the Outcasts as our favorite season of the year. It's because of how even it was between these players. Like there were a lot of great players this season, and everybody played super hard to win, and it was fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really tight season all the way through. I recall I always sent you a power rankings as well. After like either every episode or every week, and it'll just completely change after the week. Like it was a great season.
Yeah. Well, moving on from that one there, because I know a lot of people probably in the live didn't watch Survivor South Africa. We are going to continue to stay on it for one more round. We're going to talk about the International Hall of Fame entries for 2022. And following that, we'll have our last category, which I know is going to probably be hotly debated in regards to who should be on there for the Hall of Fame for Survivor US. And for this one, I definitely wanted to make sure that I had two different categories to make it fair, so we don't just get Survivor US players being added into the Hall of Fame. And we had a lot of great players up here for our first nomination. And next year, a lot of these players will probably still be up for nomination again. And I wanted to add 2 people per year to the Hall of Fame, but I decided to make it 3 because in both categories, I felt like it was so tight between some people that I kind of felt like I needed to widen it a little bit. And, there's been so many players that have played in both countries or both iterations of it, the international and the US iteration of it. So I think let's add 3 people in for each category. And we had to do it for the international one because we've got a joint second and third place in any case on that. And then we've got a winner, but it was very split between who we would think would potentially get in there. So the people that were nominated were Rob Bentelli, David Gannett, Haley Leake, Mark Wales, Luke Toki, Pia Miranda, Dino Paulo, Francois the Chappies Chapman, and then Steffi Brink. Those were the people that I added up for potential International Hall of Fame. If you had to choose one, and we'll see how many you can get right here. No. If you had to choose one, who do you think is definitely in this thing? I mean, there's 3 of them. You've got a 1 out of 3 chance of hitting one of them.
Yeah. Well, I think the top 4 players are definitely Rob Bentelli, David, Luke, and Chappies. I think the 4 of them are easily the top 4. I said Chappies is probably 4th because he didn't do that well on Return of the Outcast. Maybe he's kind of forgotten a wee bit. People probably more remember him for Immunity Island, not really being on Return of the Outcasts. I'm going to say Luke was first and Rob was second because I feel like people remember Rob a bit more than David.
Okay, so let's have a look at the outright number 1 person added to Hall of Fame. They got a total of 24% of the vote.
Oh,
it's your favorite creep. It's Luke Toki.
Hey, my creep. Yeah.
So Luke Toki is the first entry into the Nullified Take Hall of Fame. Who knows? Maybe we get him back on the podcast. I've actually spoken to him on this podcast. I've had the opportunity to interview him twice. So for anyone watching this at a later stage, if you watch any of the 2 seasons that Luke has played in, and if you want to go back and check out some of that interview, or Luke specifically, he didn't really spoil anything from his season. So even if you haven't watched any of his seasons, we just spoke about International Survivor in a crossover season and if he would be interested in playing in a crossover season. I was gutted when I didn't see him on the Challenge Australia, because I thought he's the biggest personality when it comes to Australian Survivor, when it comes to Australian reality TV. So he did win Big Brother Australia as well, the VIP celebrity version of that. He played twice in Australian Survivor. I won't give positions away. Did extremely well. Very memorable, very lovable character. I personally think when it comes to International Survivor, a crossover season, the number one name I jot down from any Survivor is Luke Toki. I put Luke Toki in every time. I voted for him as well. So I was very happy to see him get the outright number one spot here. What do you think of this entry? You did say you thought he would be one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, if you're doing crossover season, first player you put down is Luke, before you even touch America or South Africa. Luke is always the first player that you put down, just hands down. I think not only is he, a great player in general, but he's also just very fun to watch. Except I say he's a bit more than Phil, because with Phil, he gives great confessionals. But one of my favorite blindsides, without spoiling anything, is somehow he can pull off a 3-2-2-2. How can you pull off a 3-2-2-2? And
he's Luke.
And he does a similar thing to that, at the final five. Where majority is 2, it's like with no idols or anything. Like it's just nuts.
I mean, no one will forget, like him and Dave in that second season that he played, being 2 against 7 or something after the swap, and both of them somehow both of them survived that swap. It's just insane gameplay. The guy hustles. He is the Australian Tony Blockhorse and how he plays. And Tony is a big person that he looks up to as well in the game. And obviously he's got his own version of the Spy Shack and things like that. So obviously kind of imitating the GOAT. But, Luke is such a fun character, and I was so gutted not to see him on Heroes versus Villains. I think it's an absolute travesty not to have him on it, because maybe they couldn't find a spot for him, because he's kind of an anti-hero. He's not a villain, but he's not fully a hero either. So he kind of falls in between the two categories of players. But very happy to see Luke there. Zudaman, welcome to the live, says happy to be here. For some reason my notification never went off, but everyone's here is going great thus far. Yes, year's going, and happy New Year's to everyone. I don't know if I said that off the rip. I hope 2023 is a blessed one for everyone, and you guys all achieve what you want to achieve throughout the next year. And most importantly, let's hope there's great Survivor. Let's hope that the seasons that are coming out is going to be a great year of Survivor. Now, the next 2 Hall of Fame entries are equal at 18% each. And we'll start with one of the more obvious ones, because you already mentioned this person. So
David or Rob.
So I'll start off with one of the 2 more obvious ones here for the next entry. And you're right, it's one of those 2. Let me get it up.
It's Rob.
David Gannett.
Oh.
So David Gannett is in the International Hall of Fame. Obviously, it's hard not to spoil here. Played the game twice. Went reasonably deep the first time, got blindsided badly with an idol in his pocket, but showed immense awareness of the game and how it needs to be played strategically. He is a villain. He's a bona fide villain in the way that he plays the game, and he owns it. So similar to how Chris said earlier that a villain should be someone who knows that they're a villain and owns the move that they make. He is that person. He doesn't care or mind being the villain as well. So seeing him win this or be in the Hall of Fame, I'm very happy with that, because he came back in All-Stars, played one of the best games we've ever seen in any iteration of the show, fully deserves to be a Hall of Famer, and he is the second entry at 18%. What do you think of this?
Oh, I mean, I think it's very fitting, if Luke's number 1, David is 2, or David's number 1, Luke is 2, I think David's definitely one of the best players in, all versions of Survivor. He's easily a top 3 for me, so I'm really glad to see that David has won the Hall of Fame, and
Aaron Kate, hi, welcome to the live stream.
Hello, Aaron Kate. It's quite funny, Chris. I was actually talking about the other day with a close friend of mine about personal betrayals, and I actually think the betrayal David did on Daisy is probably one of the, is it really a betrayal? It's probably not really a betrayal, but the blind side of Daisy is probably one of the best blind sides in
100%.
Survivor history as well. Survivor history,
working across opposing alliances and being able to make that work is just brilliant. I mean, it was such a David thing to do. The guy has got the guts to pull off the most audacious moves. Like you would never expect anyone to pull it off, and he would go for it. It's similar to like a Luke.
Yeah.
It's why they gravitated together. Not having both of them on this Heroes versus Villains season, massive L for Channel 10 not getting them back for whatever reason. So in my mind,
absolutely, yeah.
All right. So this is going to leave us with one last for the International Hall of Fame. This last one you didn't mention up until this point. So Rob Bentelli is not in the top 3 people that got voted for International Hall of Fame. I thought Rob was going to get in. I think Rob was my vote for someone to get in.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But this person came from nothing at the bottom into a season, dominated it to a certain degree, and won it against some of the best players, or I would say the fiercest competition we've ever seen in Survivor South Africa in any case, and does deserve a spot in the International Hall of Fame. Dino Paulo, 18% of the vote. Yeah, so first All-Star season, first returnee season. He went out a vote before the merge, I think, maybe 1 or 2 votes before the merge in his original season. He was seen as a massive threat coming into that season very early on. People sniffed him out early, but then found his way back on a returnee season. My understanding is that, and I could be wrong here, but I've heard that Leroux had to fight to get him back on that season and be like, hey, we need Dino back. Came back onto that season and had a very dominant display against people that were proven, that have gone the distance, that have done really well in the game. And Dino is someone that I do have like a date still with him at some point. We're going to put him on the podcast. We're going to be talking about his win because I've never actually had the opportunity to talk about his game in full. And I'm very interested to have him on the podcast and to talk about his experience of going through both ends, like having been someone that was voted out early to coming back on a returnee season. There is no person, like he deserves to be Hall of Fame because of his gameplay and winning a very competitive season and winning against a player like Shane with a massive reputation. Shane, like we said, should not have gone to the end. He got there, but Dino still got all the votes. And he played that emotional game better than anyone else. Like it was times when he got to the swap, similar to like a Luke and a David where him and Full were in the bottom. He emotionally manipulated people to get out of that, and go a little bit further. People were handing him idols in the game. I mean, we forget, like the guy played a really good game, but outside of how good of a game he played, he's just a genuinely nice guy. And I constantly see stuff online about him reaching out to fans, giving them buffs from Survivor South Africa signed. The guy is more in touch with the Survivor community than anyone else. And it couldn't happen to a nicer guy to win. He got married recently, and now he's on the Hall of Fame for the nullified take. There you go. Dino's got the trifecta.
Exactly. Like, forget about being married. You're on the Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
How mean is that?
Nah, such a great guy. Very happy to see him win, but definitely I didn't think he was going to be voted above Rob Bentelli on this one, but I think Rob is a very strong potential to be in the next one. Obviously, we're going to continue to add more and more people to it, but I do think being the first winner of a returnee season qualifies you as the person who won against the best competition, because Rob didn't really have much competition in his season. He dominated it.
Yeah, exactly. I actually wonder how well Dino would do in like a full, South African Survival Star season, where you've got
my suspicion as well, but I don't want to put targets on him.
Yeah.
I don't want to put targets on him. My suspicion is Dino would do better than what you'd think, because he's in touch. Yeah. He's in touch with everybody. Everybody's in touch with him. Like, I don't think Rob Bentelli really floats in the Survivor circles at all. I don't really think he talks to too many people in the Survivor circles outside of Survivor. So I think in a season like that, with Rob's reputation going into the season, like I think he would be targeted way before Dino. And I don't think he would have the connections to be safe, unless he gets Nicole in there with him, and maybe the winners of Survivor South Africa, Dino and Rob and other Nicole or something. They have like a pact to look after each other. But I do think Dino, I do think that he comes in and does better than what people maybe think. I mean, like you said, Dante tried to aim at him the whole game and people still didn't take a shot. That gives you something in regards to how Dino played that game.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's used to playing from the bottom.
Yeah, and I think
so it'd be interesting to see him play from the top.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. I think if you play a lot from the bottom, it's much easier to transition to the top. But when you play from the top, it's harder to play from the bottom. It's like the case of how what is it? Like like when winners come back, they tend to struggle a lot because, well, no, not that. It's like when you haven't been to tribal council. That's right. When you haven't been to tribal council, you struggle a lot and you end up losing on the first vote often because you just don't have that experience of strategizing and feeling comfortable. When do I bring up strategy? When do I not bring up strategy? So, yeah.
Yeah. Chris here says the nullified take Hall of Fame is bigger deal than getting married. LOL. Chris, that's why I'm still not married. That's why I'm still not married.
I'm not married. Did you see a ring on these fingers? No.
So, yeah, we definitely don't have our priorities straight, Maki. That's for sure.
No.
Well, yeah, so overall, 24% of the votes went to Luke, 18% of the votes went combined to David Gannett and also Dino. And then the person that came in fourth, just missing out, was Haley Leak at 9.9%, followed by Chappies at 8%, then Mark Wales, then Rob Bentelli, and then lastly, Steffi Brink received the fewest votes on this one here. But regardless, what an honor to be even mentioned for Hall of Fame. And like I said, all of these people will be back on the vote for next time. We'll add 3 more different people into the mix and we'll see where it goes. But now let's go on to the Hall of Fame. And I'm sure this is the main event. This is what everybody came for Survivor US. Obviously, there's been 43 seasons, so many players we can choose from, but we can't sadly add all of them in immediately. So I added some of my favorite players into it. I was biased. Some of them genuinely deserve to be here. Some of them were maybe a little bit more my favorite than some of the others, but I can't say everybody received votes. There was no 0 vote getters. So it means that some people do value the same players that I do. So I had into this Hall of Fame nomination, Kim Spradlin, Boston Rob, Sandra Diaz-Twine, Tony Vlachos, Richard Hatch, Michelle Fitzgerald, Sarah Lacina, Jeremy Collins, and Sari Fields. And I can say we have got a winner, an outright winner, and an outright second and third place for this one. No ties this time when it comes to the top 3. So take a stab at who you think would be in the top 3 Hall of Fame. You had 2 out of 3 right for international, so it's a pretty impressive record. And Dino was the one you didn't get.
I feel like Sari is an outright winner because, I mean, come on, it's Sari of all people. Yeah, probably her and Luke are probably their best never win Survivor. So I'll say Sari's up there. Sandra is second. I think, Sandra definitely deserves to be a Hall of Fame. And I think Tony is third. That's my top 3.
Sorry, so you said Sari, Tony, and?
Sari, Sandra, and Tony.
Okay, that's your top 3. Chris here says, I had to throw Sarah Lacina in there. Sarah Lacina's she's a good player. I mean, you cannot deny she went to win her season, and she was one fire-making challenge away, I believe, from winning Winners at War. So that tells you a lot. Does I think if she gets into the final for Winners at War, she beats Sony, who was the biggest threat, and especially, agree or disagree with how much the fire-making challenge these days mean to people, she probably would have gotten the credit for taking out the biggest challenge or the biggest potential. Well, I think he was the biggest challenge beast that season and also the biggest threat to winning that season in Tony Vlachos. So I feel like she deserves a spot in there. But I know that some people don't like Sarah Lacina because of the Challenge USA, and I get it. Like, listen, the Challenge USA, there was a few times I cringed. But I still think she's probably a great person outside of the game. You've got to understand, this is games, brings you into stressful situations. Maybe it doesn't bring the best out of you at all times when you're out in a game such as that. But I've got a lot of love for Cops R Us. So I was really hoping that at least one of the Cops R Us people will be in this. And I can say that the outright winner at 35.5% of the vote is none other than GOAT himself, Tony Vlachos, 35% of the vote. At one point, it was 45% of the vote. So as the vote continued, he dropped a little bit, but 35.5% of the vote, people acknowledge greatness. They put Tony in the top. I think it's undisputed. There's only been 2 players in the history of the show in the US that have won twice. Tony is one of them. And if you compare Sandra and Tony's game next to each other, both games, Tony's 2 games were more impressive in my mind because it was more entertaining. He's the full package. He's great at playing the strategic game. He's great at playing in individual immunities. He's great at playing with people's emotions. Like the psychology behind what he did in Winners at War was insane. Like, I just don't think anybody plays the game like Tony. My biggest question to you, because I do stay in touch sometimes with some of the people out there that talk about a potential legendary season and who could come back. And Tony's name gets thrown out there quite a bit. Boston Rob, obviously, a few big players. Is there any upside to Tony coming back and playing again? Because in my mind, I just think he should call it like even if he does come back and go early, I still think he remains the GOAT because he's just got the record. But like, if you're Tony, do you come back and play again?
Yeah, no, that's definitely very hard. Well, I think the only reason why Tony would come back is just to have fun, because I think a two-time winner is not going to win again. If anything, there'll be a third two-time winner. But also in saying that, if there was someone to win 3 times, I think it is definitely Tony of all people. Because I think if Sandra makes the end, she probably would not win again. But I think if Tony, someone makes it to the end, it'll be such a shock. I think something for me personally I was very shocked that Tony even made the end, because I was thinking, no, there's no way this guy can get to the end.
I remember Rob as a podcast that season, like doing a draft and Tony going unpicked at the end. Like nobody picked him. And I was people were that shocked when he won. They were like, we didn't even pick this guy in the beginning of the season to have a chance. Yeah. And he was in everybody's draft at the end, not because people didn't think he was a great player or he didn't. Like, I always used to look at him as the mad scientist of Survivor because of how he won Kage-Yan, because no one could replicate Tony's way of playing the game and win. Like, no one has replicated that in my mind yet. Yeah. There's been some Tony imitators, people being casted to be the next Tony, but no one's actually been able to pull it off the way he did. And I think that for me, as much as I love Tony, I actually had this conversation with Shannon Gus as well when we spoke about International Survivor and a potential crossover season, like should he come back, all that kind of stuff. And I said to her, both of us are very big Tony fans. And I just said, listen, even as a big Tony fan, as much as it would hurt me never to see Tony again, because he doesn't remain in touch with the Survivor community. He's not online. You don't know what he's up to. He's a very private person and he's got his own life going on. As much as it would hurt me, Tony's legacy is perfect the way it is. We don't need to see him come back in my mind. Like, the only way I want to see Tony come back is if they do, and this wasn't my favorite twist for Survivor, but if they do an Island of the Idols 2 and they need 2 more legends to come back and do the game, then bring Tony and Sari or Tony and Parvati, or I could see Tony in that instance coming back to complete the Mount Rushmore of heads on Survivor. But I don't want to see him outside of that. We've got new legends like Jesse now that we can follow, or other people that have come in to play the game. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Now I'd love to see Tony come back and play, but no matter what, he's always like the GOAT.
Yeah. We've got Chris here, shocked. Tony got the most votes. I figured he would be Hall of Fame, but surprised he won outright. I think you underestimate how popular Tony is. I think Tony is a lovable character, firstly. And a lot of people really enjoyed that. So, I mean, I'm not shocked, but I get it. There's a lot of other lovable characters as well. And maybe one of them will still make this Hall of Fame afterwards as well. Zunuman says definitely he's still goated even if he's a pre-merger. Jay says we've seen enough of Tony. Don't need to see him again. Time for new stars to shine. I agree with you, Jay. Love Tony, but I'm happy for, there's a whole era of people that have not come back yet to play the game again, and that I want to see play the game again. I know some people may not agree with me on this. Rick Devens is one of them for me. I want to see Rick Devens play the game again. I want to see Lauren Beck play the game again. There's few people that have played the game that have not come back to play again. Sandra demonstrated that 2-time winners don't fare well when returning. Yep, 100%. I mean, she's got a massive target. But the funny thing for me on Sandra, I just want to put that out there, Mucky, but maybe let's leave it. Maybe we'll get to talk about Sandra in a bit. We'll talk about Sandra, I'm sure. Chris says Island of the Idols doesn't ever need to return. Yeah, agree with you. I still need to see another second chance. 100% with you on that. Okay, let's move on to the next person here that is going to be in the Hall of Fame. And let me just see who got the second vote. So 35.5% is the highest vote getter. This person is the second highest vote getter, and they got 19% of the vote in total. So there's a bit of a gap between them. I think it was 19%.
Sari. It's definitely Sari.
How angry would you be if it's not Sari?
You see these?
You don't have to be angry.
It's not Sari.
You don't have to be angry. Calm down. Put the keys down, Mucky. Put the keys down.
I'll put the keys down.
Well, we do have Sari Fields here as a Hall of Fame entry, second most popular person in the vote here. Sari, even though she's never won the game, she really is that person that represents what Survivor is about for a lot of people. There's a lot of people who watch the show and don't know if they can do it. They don't know if they can go out there. I mean, I sometimes like I'd love to play the game, but sometimes I'm like, man, can I survive 3 days without eating? I love food, Mucky. You know?
Yeah.
But Cherie's the person. She got up off the couch.
Yeah.
She went to go play the game, and she did extremely well. She did get screwed out of a season when she came back the last time. So we definitely need to see Cerie back on our screens in Survivor. I know she's going to get to play the Traders US, which is premiering very soon. But we want to see her back on Survivor.
She's never been voted out normally either. You know, she's been taken out fire making, a random final 2 to a final 3, idled out in the split vote, which that move should not have worked. You know, I think it's definitely wrong for JT to flip there. And then obviously the immunity training game changers. She's never been outright unanimously been voted out. There's always been some kind of twist or some kind of element of the game that's taken her out rather than just a normal vote. But yeah, I'd love to see Cerie come back and play again. I think she's, you know, I think in game changers she's probably the first or second out of the, you know, ever got a tribal. But I think actually helped her game to never go to tribal pre-merge, because just like Sandra, that's the part she's always going to struggle with. But once they reach merge, she's in it for the long haul, especially if she's got like a good group around her following her.
Now, I'm interested to know, Jay, would you be okay with seeing Cerie? Because you were like, you know, we don't need to see Tony back again. How do you feel about Cerie? Is the fact that Cerie still hasn't won maybe something that would convince you that we need to see Cerie as a fifth-time player on the show? Because for me personally, I'm not tired of Cerie. I mean, there's been a big gap between the last time we saw Cerie play and now. I think that if we do have some old school legends versus new school legends, Cerie is one of those old school legends I would love to see come back, play the game against some of the new school. I'd love to see if Cerie can hang with the new kids, with the new faster game, you know, that they've got nowadays. I really enjoy Cerie. I mean, she's had one bad showing. I think it was in Heroes versus Villains, but it was also because of her threat level. And JT, people like to think that JT is a bad player. I just think that JT is a decent player, but he likes to take risks because he's already won one. So he kind of feels like he's playing with house money whenever he's playing.
Exactly.
Sandy says they need to make something for Cerie, something like Redemption Island for Boston Rob. I'm not a fan of giving people a win, so I don't know if I'm in the camp of like we need to give Cerie a win, but I would love to see Cerie back. I definitely am going to check out Traitors US because she's going to be on it, and there's a few people that I'm going to be following on there that I'd like to see do well. So I agree with Chris. Cerie's always invited back. So great person to add into this first 3 different categories or different names that we're going to be adding to the Hall of Fame here. Let's have a look at the last one. Do you want to have a final guess on who you think this last person is going to be that's going to get added?
I think it's Sandra or Boston Rob. But I feel like not many people are high on Boston Rob anymore, especially on Facebook. Like everyone always crap talks Boston
Sandra Diaz Twine.
It is Sandra.
So Sandra is added as the final Hall of Fame person here. So Cerie is surrounded by great names here because there's 2 two-time winners and Cerie in the top 3. But, you know, Sandra Diaz Twine deserves her spot at the top. I wasn't impressed by her first win. The first time she won, I was like, okay. It's not the type of win I normally enjoy. But then she came back, won the second time at a point where I like the bombastic play. I like the strategic play. So I was kind of a Russell fan back then, but I definitely understand. Like, I still think Russell deserves to be mentioned as one of the best to ever play the game and to also change the game. I don't think you can discredit him from that. But the more you see Russell's content on YouTube, the more you understand why he didn't win. And he just doesn't have that softness to him or humbleness. And Sandra played that game perfectly. She rode him to the end. She did try and get rid of him a few times, didn't succeed at that, but she rode him to the end and used his nature against them at the final tribal council to get the votes. And she became the first 2-time winner. She won against people who have never won the show, which Tony still didn't do. You know, it's a credit to her. Like in Tony's season, they had to give the win to a previous winner. Sandra's win, they didn't have to do that. They could have given it to Russell. They didn't. So, and she beat a bunch of non-winning players. So all the respect to the Queen. And one of the things I wanted to add, right, is that, I think Chris or someone said she hasn't done well when she's come back after 2 times winning, so we don't need 2-time winners to come back. I actually think I've gained more respect for Sandra personally in her gameplay since she won twice and she's come back, because I feel like every single time she's come back, she's put up a good fight and she's played a lot more aggressive than what we ever saw her play in the first 2 wins that she got, because she's now forced to play that way because of the level of threat that she carries when she comes into a season. And I've really enjoyed seeing that, Sandra. I even enjoyed seeing Sandra play Australian Survivor. Shout out to the Queen for coming over and giving Nina an opportunity to become a Survivor player herself.
Exactly. And I think Sandra played a lot better as well in game changes. She did make one mistake in Winners at War, obviously, but she doesn't have Denise Idol. She makes the merge. She's the only old schooler apart from Tyson who doesn't get, who makes the merge and doesn't get voted out. And I think even Australian Survivor, for such a challenge-heavy, heavy franchise as well, for literally like a lot of athletes, sporty people and stuff, the fact that she made it to the tribe swap and was targeted so many times, was able to weasel her way through. She received a lot of votes along the way, but she was able to do all that and not actually get voted out. I'm rewatching Blood vs. Water at the moment with my partner, and she's not like a real massive Sandra fan because she hasn't seen her other seasons yet, but she's definitely very impressed by how, with such a franchise that's so into challenges, Sandra's famously not very good at challenges, so how is she able to weasel her way through? So
Sandra did well.
Yeah.
Sandra did well standing up in that Australian season to actually compete. But the level of respect I have for Sandra, like, it just, every time she comes back, it grows for me. Like, I wasn't a fan of Sandra walking away from Edge of Extinction on Winners at War, but I mean, Sandra's done it all. She's got nothing to prove. She's won twice, So
Exactly.
I don't hold it against her legacy, even though I would have liked to have seen her stay and fight it out. She made a calculated decision, and she looked at people like Tyson and Boston Rob and the likes of, I don't even remember who else was on the island at the time, but definitely Tyson and Boston Rob was there.
Parvati and
Natalie. These are all challenge beasts.
Yeah, she had no chance of coming back, and I think if you're Sandra, you've won twice. Why not just go home? Like, you've already got the title, because if you,
and she never wanted to vote. She never wanted to vote for a winner. She's like, I don't need to vote for a winner. I can go. So it's funny how the two-time winners have never voted for a winner ever. So they've only been voted for, but they've never had to vote or cast a vote for another winner. But yeah, again, every time she comes back, just mad respect. And the fact that, when Survivor US rejected Nina Diaz Twine as a player and never gave her a shot, she was like, you know what? I'll go to Australia. I'll give Nina a chance to play in Australian Survivor. And Nina was a massive success in that franchise. And that was probably the only way. Like, I feel similar about Sandra and how I feel like about Tony. We don't need to see these two players come back and play again. We've seen enough, like, maybe in the future if there's like a special circumstance, but I'm kind of at the point now where they're legends, leave them as legends. But the one iteration, or the one way I didn't mind seeing them, was when it was to bring, I guess, like, for her to come and bring Nina into the franchise and to make her a Survivor player. Maybe if we have a global showdown and you really want to get the best versus the best, we see them back. I could accept that, but we don't need them in the Survivor US, I don't think, anymore.
Yeah. And I think as well, I do agree that in terms of their own retrospective seasons, Tony did play a lot better on the second time to win than Sandra. However, the big difference is a second winner was going to happen no matter what with Tony. Whereas with Sandra, 100%. I think Parvati played a great game as well. You had so many real strong players who made the merge. And I think even though the jury was never going to vote for Russell and it was always between her and Parvati, I think the fact that she still won with a really good all-star cast, Heroes vs. Villains is still one of the top American seasons. The fact that she was able to beat probably two of the biggest players that season still shows like her gameplay was definitely like really good too. Probably a bit better than Tony's,
I agree with you.
Maybe. Yeah.
I will go back to read the comments. I've seen some good comments come in since we've talked about Sandra, but let's have a look at the vote and how it sort of shaped up. So like I said, 35% of people, 35.5 to be precise, voted for Tony as a Hall of Fame entry, followed by Sari Fields at 19.1%, followed by Sandra at 15.6%, and then Boston Rob just missing out at 11.3%. So he didn't get in on this iteration of it, but it's not like he doesn't have his fans. And I know there's some people saying, I am Boston Rob, this and that. Like, I'll be honest, I've seen enough of Boston Rob as well. I kind of put him in that category, but I do respect what Boston Rob has done for Survivor. He is a legend. He is.
Yeah.
I'm sure if we do another Hall of Fame, he's going to sneak his way in the next 3. I'd be shocked if he's not in the next 3 players that'll be added to the Hall of Fame. A lot of people see him as a Mount Rushmore player. I did think at Winners at War, he showed an inflexibility that puts him behind the likes of a Sari, a Sandra, and a Tony in my mind, because all 3 of those players will adapt to the game that's in front of them, where Boston Rob did not want to adapt. He didn't want to, if he played with Adam Klein at that point where Adam Klein wanted to make a move, even though Adam Klein kind of forced him, he may have survived a little bit longer in the game. So I feel like he was showing the old school approach. And I think Boston Rob, and again, I don't want to underestimate the guy. He's clearly got game. If Boston Rob comes to new school Survivor, I think he struggles, because it's such a different game now compared to what it used to be. And I think Winners of War kind of showed it.
I mean, I don't know. Like, he'll keep playing the shot in the dark, and it'll be the first time it ever works.
Yeah, like Tony is a madman. Tony's a madman. He comes into the new seasons, I reckon he could still, I mean, he had an extortion thrown at him and he survived it. Like, I mean, the guy can take curveballs, and I think that Sari, I think, is adaptable. But there was a question that someone asked here. Jay said, that's the thing though, Chris, a bit late with this question, but do you think Sari would do well in a new era type of season? And that's an interesting question. I think she can, because I really think that to some degrees, Marianne is that Sari type of player and type of winner. She's a lot younger than what Sari was the first time she played, but Marianne was a great social player. She wasn't really a physical threat or anything like that. Yeah. And I think that she plays a similar game to like a Sari in some way. So I think she could still win. I think Survivor still has winners that are playing the game under the radar. It still has winners that sit and wait for the opportunity to make a move. And I think I've said this a few times. I feel like nowadays, 1 or 2 big moves can make you win the game. Like, it doesn't have to be you're this dominant player from the beginning. I think it's harder to win doing that these days. Yeah,
I actually think that Tony would do extremely well in the new era, simply because it is just that fast pace, and he's always extremely fast. You know, there are some tribal councils that literally just the next day after the previous one. You know, whereas with Sari, I feel like she'll do much better in the longer season, because how she really wins people over is by having that time to form really strong social bonds with her. That's why people don't want to flip on her. Like, you know, Michaela, Andrea, Aubrey, you know, they're never going to flip on her Game Changers. Maybe Andrea, but later on. But they're never going to try to vote her out, because she really builds strong bonds with people, and that's how she's able to really like brutally manipulate people to do what she wants, because she can spend that long time forming the relationships. Yeah.
No, I agree 100%. Chris says, I think Sari would do well in the new era season. As she once said, you can always beat them with these, which is brawn or guns, but you can't beat them with the brains. So yeah, I think she's adaptable. And also Zudaman saying we can see on Traders, like we can see if she's lost a step or two when she plays in Traders. I'm excited for that. Are you going to watch Traders US?
I'm not sure how I'll be able to watch it, but I'll definitely find a way to.
We'll talk about it offline. I'm sure I can find a way for you to watch it, because I definitely am. We'll be following it. There's a few returning players, Stephanie LaGrossa also on that season, so it'll be interesting to see a couple of Big Brother players as well and so forth. Chris asked, did Richard Hatch get the fewest amount of votes? It was actually a tie. It was a tie between Richard Hatch, Sarah Lucina, and Jeremy Collins for the least votes. So they all 3 had 2.8% of the vote. Myself and Gerald had 7%. Who else is there? Oh, sorry, Kim Spradlin as well. Equal lowest votes with Sarah Lucina, Jeremy, and Richard Hatch, which I'm a bit surprised about. I guess Kim, even though people recognize she was a great player, maybe not the most exciting player to watch.
Yeah, definitely. I think she was quite fun to watch them Winners at War, but that's because she was more of an underdog than a top dog.
Yeah. Well, we've gotten to the end here of the live in regards to all of the awards. We've given it away to everybody. I'll make sure to post this on some socials, so probably Instagram, maybe Twitter, to hype a little bit the show. We've spoken for about an hour and a half here about all of these different categories. I hope that everybody on the live has had some fun following along as we spoke about all of the categories. We'll definitely do this again next year. Maybe we'll add a few more shows as we continue to cover different shows here as well, if this works really well. But thank you so much to everybody on the live that joined joined us today to take part in the best of the best for 2022. 2023 is going to be a great year. We're not certain if Survivor South Africa is returning yet. It hasn't been renewed yet for the 2023 season. So I kind of feel like if it does come back, we won't see it until 2024 at this point. But we will have Australian Survivor, and we definitely will have 2 more seasons for Survivor US. So at least 3 seasons there that we can talk about moving forward. If you're late to the show, if you watched up until this point, we very much appreciate it. Please consider to subscribe. It does help with the recognition of the channel. We hope that we earned your subscription here today. Put a like on the video, put a comment below, let us know what you agree with, what you disagree with. And we'll be back very shortly. Mucky's going to be joining me for Australian Survivor Euros versus Villains. We're going to be talking about the whole season. And the lives may not be the best for some of our US audience, but we hope that you still check it out at a later stage and put some comments on there and let us know what you think. If you are worried about how you can watch Australian Survivor, there's a few different places that you can. If you're savvy with the internet and do a bit of search, there's a few ways you can watch it. But the one that I want to endorse is that if you do have a VPN, you can VPN to Australia, jump on 10play.com.au. That's 10play.com.au. Put your location, your geolocation to Sydney, and it's absolutely free. And you're supporting the show as well online. But let me know if you really, really struggle, and I'll see if I can help you guys out there. I think it's going to be a great season. We've got some great returnee people coming back, and Mucky and myself, potentially the likes of Michelle, who I do the Amazing Race with on some of the episodes, and then also Kahuna, who I've done the Challenge Australia. All of us will be at some stage coming back to talk about the season and do a draft pick. That should drop within the next week or 2. Keep an eye on the channel as I post it up. Should be fun and exciting to see how we go and see if I can redeem myself, because I got badly beaten by Jake in this last fantasy league that we did. But for now, guys, thank you so much. All the best for 2023. Thank you for joining, and catch you guys next time. Bye.